Hello everyone, and today we are going to be making a three-dimensional bird box, learning how to draw birds and make a 3D box.
The very first part of the project for your bird box is making the actual box itself. Now, quick tip on this, right? We're going to use a piece of A4 paper, right, white paper for this. And if you make, so when you know how to make this, you can actually make a box with a lid, because if you have two pieces of paper and one is just a tiny bit smaller than the other, then one can sit inside the other, okay? So while we're making it like this today, you can use the same method to make a box with a lid. And I use it a lot around Christmas time when I'm making like treats, you know, like homemade things and that. I can decorate them and it's like really good because it can look really professional as well. So, but you'll have the video to do that, all right? So get your white paper. Now, I said like thick white paper, but if you don't have thick white paper, it's okay because we can reinforce it a little bit. But you're going to start, and the only reason I say thick white paper is it makes it a little bit more stable on the edges, all right? So a piece of paper like this, okay, so kind of landscape wise. And the first part is folding, sort of like an origami project, okay? Now we do use a little bit of gluing on it, but get your piece of paper like this. All right, and we're going to fold it over long ways, okay? And then bend it down. So just give it a light crease there. So you start landscape, fold it over, okay? So what we're doing is we're going to be bending it to get these edges, all right? Okay, so when you have that, open it back up, okay? So this here, that's going to be the center of the box. And what we're going to do first is we're going to make these two edges here, the long edges, all right? So what we do is each of the edges, excuse me, we fold into that center line, okay? So take one edge, fold it in. Now, these are the sides of your box. You want to get them as straight as possible, okay? And for these edges, really important, you crease them really well. So you see how I'm creasing it with my finger? Because this here, right, this is the edge of the box here, okay? So you want to make sure it's really, really well creased, okay? So I run my finger along it. And then I do exactly the same thing on the other side and making sure that they're meeting in the middle, because again, you want each side to be the same, okay? So make sure they're touching in the middle and again, crease it along. And if it's a little bit off or anything, just redo it, okay? So crease it down there, run your finger along it. So you can see there, see how they meet in the middle? Because these are going to be the edges of your box, okay? Now, so open it up again, and you should, if you creased it right, see, if you put it up like that, just check that you've got two kind of crisp lines, okay? So as you'll see here, see the way this is the sides, okay? The next step is these two here. So we want to make sure, okay, that they're all the same height, all right? And to do this, we need to make this, see this line here, we need to find how to do that at the top. So this is a trick, right? We are going to fold, so just watch what I do first and then follow. You're going to fold each corner, okay, in to make a triangle, okay? Because what that will do is this will give us that height, okay? So what you're going to do on each corner, you're going to fold it in like that. And if you see here, I'll just do a little line. So see these lines that we drew, okay? This edge needs to fold to that, okay? So it can't be off like this. It can't be squiffy. It has to fold in. So it's sitting, see the way? Sitting against that edge there, okay? And you do that for each corner. So you're bringing this edge in to side of our box there, to that bit there. And you're going to do that for each corner, okay? Fold it down. Turn mine around so I can see the line. And if you want to check the line, you can kind of bend it in, or you can like use a ruler, you know, just to make sure that it's straight on the line. Okay. Okay, so I'll give you a second to do that. All right, so now what we're going to do is, see this here, they should be down the same height. So what we're going to do is we want to end up with a square shape now. So we fold, okay, fold this around this line here. So if you imagine this is your line here, okay, and you're folding your box in around like that, okay? So see that line, fold it down, okay? And a trick is, okay, this crease here, it should line up with that crease there, okay? So then you know you're on track. You see how the crease lines up? Okay, and again, this line is going to be the side of the box here. So crease it really well, because that's going to be another edge, and you want the edges to be as crisp as possible because it helps the box stand. All right, so crease it down like that, and then you do the exact same thing on the other end. And I sometimes use a ruler just to bend around it. It can help sometimes, bending around, and again, match up this crease with that line. That's a good trick to make sure that you haven't gone off a little bit, or something isn't lining up. Because the better that you do all these lines, the more square, the more rigid your box will be. Okay. And you can start with any size paper, any rectangular size paper, and make the same kind of box. Okay. So we have this creased, nice straight lines. Okay. Then we're going to open everything back up again. Okay, so open it all back up again. Now I'm just going to draw some lines so you can see them. You don't need to draw these, but I just want you to be able to see where we're doing our next step. Okay, so you will also need your scissors for this. So get your scissors. Now, so at the moment, right, see the way these are the sides, but obviously the corner is not going to bend in, okay? Now, there are two ways to do this. We're going to do it with cutting and glue, but you can also fold them in like this, okay? And glue it like that, okay? So you can fold them in like that and glue it. So I'm actually going to show you both ways, okay? You can decide which way you want to do, okay? So I'll show you both. The first way to do it is you cut in here like this. Okay, so I'll go through both of them twice, all right? But the first way you cut in, so you cut a line here, and it's just into this point here, all right? So that's the first way, and then you fold it up and glue it, okay? Method number one. Method number two is you bend, see this here, bend it in. So if you start with this point here, bend that in. So if you put your finger on this, bend it in, tuck that inside, and squish it down. Now, you just pick which way works the best for you. If you're finding one tricky, just use the other one, okay? Either way, we're going to have to use some glue to hold it together, okay? So method number one, you cut a line, you cut a diagonal line with your scissors in to this point, and you do that on every corner, and both will work perfectly well. And you fold it in, and then we're going to glue it, okay? And making sure, whichever way you do it, if you see here, you have to have that straight corner. So they're not like sticking up like this, okay? They're tucked in nice and neatly like that, okay? Everything is in line. The second way, you get your corner, you pull it in. So you see there, so you're pulling it in, and then you're going to be putting glue and sticking it down. Okay, so get your glue. You can use Pritt Stick, or I just have some PVA glue left. So if I'm cutting it, draw my diagonal line, cut along into that point, and then put a bit of glue on each triangle, just where it's going to be glued down, like that. And then make sure you're getting that kind of L-shaped corner. And I find sometimes you need to kind of hold it together a bit for that part, squish it in. Okay. Now, if you're doing the other part, you're taking that point and you're pulling that. So you're kind of pushing it in. It wants to go out, but you're pushing it in like that. And you're squishing that down. So squish it back. And then you'll need to put a bit of glue in a few places. So in this little kind of corner here. Oops. And then wherever it's going to need to stick together. So I'm going to put a bit of glue on the other side. Push it in. So either way works. This way, I've cut the sides and I put a little bit of glue, triangle, and I'm making sure, you see how I'm making sure that each corner, that fold, they're tucking in together. And if you do it and it's a little bit raised up or it's not perfect, you can just pull it apart and do it again, okay? And I'm gonna stick that there. And this one, I've pulled it in. So I'm gonna put some glue in here. There we go. And just pull it back. And I'm making sure that that corner there is crisp. And then at each corner, you just kind of have to pull in corners. And now if you were gonna make a lid, inside for this box, you get the same size paper, right? And you would cut it. This is just a demo that you can watch later on, but you would cut it a little bit smaller, right, than that piece of paper. Okay, so you'd cut it, make sure it's even, follow the exact same instructions, and then it will sit inside your box, and you can make a box with a lid. You can make them smaller and bigger. Okay? For decoration, you have several different options, all right? You have like watercolor paints if you want to use them. You can color with, markers if you want to. If you had colored papers, you could stick colored papers on them. What is important is that you are creating. We're going to be learning how to draw different types of birds in a little bit and make them stand up in the box, okay? So inside your box, you're creating a world for your birds to exist in, all right? And this artwork, it's based on the work of Claire Youngs, who creates these little kind of collage birds, and she uses different parts for each bird and makes them all nice looking, okay? So when you are painting inside, you have to think about where in the world is it? Is it in a jungle? Is it a forest? What's going on? Okay. So inside, you've got to be more specific in your design. There's the ground, there's the sky. And what I do is I wrap. So around here, I'd have like trees kind of wrapping around the edge to make it have a 3D look. Okay. And then on the outside, right, you can really do whatever you want. You could use paints if you wanted to, you could use markers and colors. It's totally up to you, all right? So because we want the inside to dry before we put the birds in, we're going to start with the inside. And that obviously you might not be using paints on it. I'm going to personally use watercolor paints for mine, for the inside, okay? But like I said, you can use markers, you could use oil pastels, whatever you want, okay, for the inside. So I'm going to get myself set up with my paints. So you decide what you are going to pick. Got my table covering. Just going to get my paintbrush. Going to use like a bigger and a smaller one. The reason why I love to use the watercolor paints as well is that, one, they dry quickly, so you can do layers. So I think on mine, I'm going to have mine in a jungle. And for the back, I'm going to do, if you want to layer up, then do the first, whatever you're going to layer up, do that first. So on my background, I'm going to kind of do the blue sky and a bits of green for hills. And then I'm going to come back and do bits of trees on it. Okay, so I'm going to do that first. And I'm just going to use a little palette here. I'll start at the back, and I'm going to make sure in my background it's not too wet, because I want to be able to do my layers on it. So have it wet enough that it will spread, okay, but not too wet that it'll all drip. So I'm going to do kind of green. I'm going to have trees coming up on behind it. So this is just for my background here, really. Remember, always the sky always meets the ground. You don't have white space between the two in nature. And also remember that the sky doesn't necessarily need to be blue. You know, look at the sky today. There's like shades of grays in it. It's not always like blue is the strongest color in it, but it's not always blue. So I'm going to do for my sky is going to be coming down. And remember the lid, that part there, that's going to be your sky. And it'll come down to the horizon line. I'm going to mix a little bit of black into my sky. Obviously, it depends, you know, it could be nighttime. You could be in the middle of the sea. And your sky might be all different colors. I want mine to look a little bit stormy. And again, my sky is going to go around the edge as well. Remember that your box doesn't just end. It's not flat. You're creating that 3D world. Going around there. Going back that way as well. What I like to do at watercolors as well is I layer up. So I'm coming back and I'm adding a little bit more blue to it. So it can almost look like there's sort of like, you know, clouds coming through the sky. In different shades. Coming in. I'm going to add a little bit of black into that there. So now my sky above is a little bit darker, but that's okay because the sky changes. So creating my sky there. And we can even, you could even create like, you know, little clouds. We could have like 3D clouds coming out from the sky as well. Loads of different possibilities. Just going to put a little bit more black into there. A bit more blues. Okay. Sometimes what I like to do is I like to kind of move it around to get a little bit of dripping. So see there, kind of move it to get an idea of more clouds coming in. Oops. I'm going to put more greens down the bottom, I think. And go around the side as well. Don't forget the sides, remember? It's a 3D space, so whatever you're doing should have that wraparound feel to it. Remember with your colors, like mix different shades. I'm going to mix a little bit of brown with my green there, just to get a little bit darker. Remember, if you're mixing a darker color, it's going to be more dominant, so use a little bit less of it. I'm just going to I want to get a few different shades in there so it's not all the one green. You think about it, anytime you want to make a picture more realistic, don't just use the one color, mix a few colors together, because that's what gives it sort of texture and layers, makes it look more like real life. Now, I don't want to overwork it. I don't want it to get too wet. So I'm just gonna there. And for my ground, I'm gonna maybe mix some browns in together. And that's a bit red. Get a bit more light brown there. And if you're not sure of a color, like test it out beforehand, just to check before you commit it to your box, just in case. Oh, it's a bit green still. A bit more brown on it. And you can always come back and like stick different bits of paper onto it. Like for example, say if I wanted to have maybe a path or something on my ground, I could come back when it's dry and then stick some, stick some paper onto it. And then mix in some different colors here. Get little bits of grass. And I'm going to be coming back to my background and I'm going to be adding other bits of grass, but for now it's too wet, so I'm just going to leave that for now. Oops. And the trick is as well, don't overwork it. Don't go back and forth too much on it because you'll end up kind of almost taking up the layer of the paper. Right, let's see if that is dry enough. Okay, I'm going to experiment and see if it's dry enough to add some trees. I'm going to use a thinner brush because I just want to get kind of details. I'm just going to do it at the bottom just to check. Yeah, it might be okay. Needs to be a bit. So if I'm going over with another layer, I try and make sure it's not as watery, so I start with a bit less. Mine's still a little bit wet, but it might be okay. What I want to do is I want to do like a tree, sort of starting here, but then have the branches coming around the corner just to make it have that like 3D effect. So with my brown, I'm making sure that the brown isn't as watery. So it's a little thicker. Just make my tree nice and you don't need to worry too much about scale because the birds we're going to be doing are going to be bigger, but you just imagine they're closer to you and these trees are further away, so obviously they're smaller. I have my branches going around the corner like that. Oops. So it feels like it's all kind of in together. And I'm going to do similar on the other side, I think. I might make this a little bit darker. So I'm going to add a little bit of black to my brown, as if maybe there's more light over here, but there is less light here. So the tree is a little bit darker. So thinking about those things like, where is the light coming from? So over here, it's going to be a little bit darker. So the actual tree is going to be in the shade. And when I'm doing trunk of the tree, just trying to make it, it's not a straight line up. Starts off a little bit wider at the bottom, then it comes up. Oops. Comes out around the edge. And even with this tree, you can have it coming up as well onto your sky. So see how it can come right up into the sky to give a really 3D effect. Because that's what you want it to feel. You kind of almost want to not notice. See that there's a line there, because it's all seamless, all right? Yeah, it's all kind of blending in. Now, what I might do a bit later is the way this is not as well defined, but I might come back when it's even a bit drier and do it a bit more. And just imagine like this is the canopy of the forest, and there's, when you look up, there's trees overhead as well. And on this one, what you can do as well is you can add like little darker shades to it. because, you know, you don't necessarily want it all to be the same color. So on this side here, I'm going to pretend the light's coming in from this direction, right? So on one side and on the undersides of the branches, see on the undersides of the branches, I'm just going to add a little bit darker shade as if the light's coming from above. So under the branches is just a tiny little bit darker. All these tiny little things that just make your drawing or your painting just look a little bit more realistic. So it's just, I've just mixed the lighter shade of the brown with slightly darker brown. You can mix it with a black, just enough that makes it look a little bit darker. Okay. I'm going to do the same over here with a bit of black, getting in there. Now, if you find that your background is a little bit dark, or sorry, a little bit wet, you just leave it for a minute, okay? You can always come back at the end and add it in. Right. Gonna have. Okay, I'm not going to overwork that. I don't want to get it. And when it's wet, if you add too much, you might notice that it almost like it kind of takes up a layer of the paper. So I don't want to do that there. But what I do want to do is add grasses here. I'm just going to do little bits of sort of different greens and blue, greens and browny tones here. And then, and again, that's a little bit wet, so I'm just going to dry it off a bit. Remember, when you're layering, you just don't want it to be too wet. And if you're doing, I'm going to do grasses, and I'm just going to kind of flick it up like that. So sort of, and what you can also do is you can push down at the start, right, to make it thicker, and then kind of bring it up. You just need to have enough water on your brush that it spreads, right? Then I'm going to do a different color. You can layer with different colors as well. So you could even come back again and have like brighter tones. So it's almost like this is at the back. Then you got brighter tones at the front. I'm going to do some greens over here. Oh, that's a little bit thick. Remember, it should just look like, it shouldn't look top heavy. So it should just look thicker at the bottom. I'm just filling in there and dabbing in a little bit. And then thinner, a bit more willowy as it comes up towards the top. All right. And I think I add a little. I wonder if this will work. I might regret doing this, but I'm gonna try and add a little river coming down here. A little bit dark, so I'm gonna pull it back a little bit. And remember that if there's something you do and you're like, I don't know if I like that, you can always cover it up with a piece of paper, or, you know, change it, or come back and you could, stick one of your designs over it. Not 100% about my river, but I think it's all right. I think what I might do is add more kind of little green foliage around the edge, so it doesn't look like it's kind of stark in the middle. Yeah. So just, I think what I didn't like was it sort of looked like it was standing by itself. So I'm just adding a little bit of greens around the edge just to give it context. Because you wouldn't normally see, if you think about a river or something like that, normally it's going to have something along its banks. It's not going to look like it's just popped out of the ground. Yeah, no, I prefer that like that. So what you'll need for this part is white paper. Okay, now it doesn't have to be thick white paper because we're going to stick the birds to a little bit of cardboard at the end. So just plain white paper, and you'll need your pencil, and you might need a rubber as well. Okay, now I'm going to draw in marker because otherwise it's very hard for you to see on the screen. Okay, just leave your box off to the side to dry. And the first thing that we're going to do, so I'm going to show you two different types of birds. Okay, so I'm going to show you two different types of birds. All right, we're going to start with the simplest one first, okay, which is a flying bird, and then we're going to do the bird that is walking or standing. All right, and for these I'm going to show you them in with the outline first. So I'm going to do it in marker. Obviously you're doing it in the pencil, so I'm going to draw it once and then we can draw it together. Okay, and then in terms of the size wise, I'll draw it once and then we'll talk a little bit about size. Okay, so for this one, it's probably the simplest bird that you can draw. Okay, it starts with a loop, so you go down, make a loop around. Okay, so this part here is going to be the tail, and then this part here is the body of the bird. Okay, and it comes back like this for the tail. All right, so this is the body here, and then this is going to be the tail here. So this is always like the first type of bird I ever show anyone how to draw. And keep it simple with the eye, and then the beak. And what I do with the beak is I curve it in, so this part here you would rub out. Okay, and then for the feathers of the tail, you can kind of, depending on what kind of bird you can do, you can have them coming in like that, the feathers. And then for the wings, most important thing is they curve backwards. Okay, so I always start with two curved lines going backwards about at the same point. Okay, and then again here you can do a few different styles. You can kind of have them sort of, you know, going in like that if you want to, or you can have it the lines going like that. You can have them show more detail of the wings if you want to, or have it more of a solid shape. Okay, so in terms of size wise, obviously that would be too big for my box. Okay, so before we draw our final one, we need to look at what size we want it to be. Okay, so if you were going to draw this for your box, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a flying bird and then a walking bird. All right, so say if I wanted in my box to have a flying bird, I would cut my piece of paper to the size. So because it's for a specific size, I cut my paper first because I don't want to draw something, do all the work, and then realize it's actually too big. Even then, I'm going to do it a little bit smaller there. Okay. Okay, so even if you're not going to do this as your bird, I'd like you to draw along with me, because then you will learn how to do it. So this is smaller, so I need to make sure that I leave enough space for the beak here. So I start at one end, and I'm going to draw my wing. So it goes down, remember, so you're going down in a loop. So go down and around. So I'm leaving enough space at this end for the beak. Curve it back around into a loop. Okay, sort of like a knot, right? So then do the tail. I like to do mine with just some feathers going on. I don't like to do it just as a straight line across, because this just gives it a little bit more texture. Okay. Oops. Then the eye. And for my eye, okay, so at the moment it looks a little bit like a fish. This is also a good way to draw a fish. But I leave a tiny little dot of white in my eye, okay, just to reflect the light. So then the next part is the beak. Again, the beak like that. And then the wings, okay? The beak is just basically a carrot shape. The wings, remember, have them curving back because the bird's flying forward, so the wings and the wind is curving them back. So start with two curved lines, coming back, okay? I'm gonna do my wings like that. And sometimes I end up turning it around just to get the right line. Okay, so the loop, then finish off the tail, the eye and the beak, the curved lines for the wings, coming in. Okay, and then I'm going to add any other detail with either, you do with paints or you do with coloring pencils or markers. It's totally up to you guys. Okay, so that is how you do your flying bird. All right, now we won't color it in or anything yet. We're just doing the drawings and outlines first. But that will be small enough that I could put it up in the top corner of my box. We'll be cutting them out, so you won't have the background, but for now, just have the outline. Okay, now I'm gonna put that one off to the side. Okay, so the next bird that we're gonna draw is the bird that's running. Okay, and this is a sort of a style that you see in a lot of illustrations, maybe like children's books illustrations, simpler design. It's not as realistic, you know, as a real life bird, but it works well as kind of a print. Again, I will draw it once and then we can draw it together. All right, so for this one, I start the neck, and anytime I'm learning how to draw anything myself, I always look at the shapes. Okay, so the shapes of the body, and then I think, how can I describe that? What does it look like? So for this bird, I describe it, I start up here, and you would be drawing these with light lines, you can rub them out. But I describe it as like a long cliff. You're going down to the bottom of the valley. It's a long line, so this is the neck, going down, and this is the belly of the bird, and it's coming up here towards the tail. Okay, but it doesn't go up quite as high because the neck is higher. And then you go over, like it's a little hill, so you're going back towards the neck. Okay, and don't make the neck too thin because you want it to look in proportion to the rest of the bird. And then the neck comes up and curves over like that. Okay, then you can have, whoops, the beak, the eye. You can have little feathers if you want for the top of your bird, the head, tail feathers maybe, the wing, which I'm going to keep as a simple shape here, and maybe a second wing from the other side. And then the legs, it would depend, is your bird, you know, flying? So keeping the legs simple, I do them in two parts. So you could have kind of the joints like that. And because you're going to be cutting it out, you can't really cut out all the little parts of it, okay? So they might look a little bit small. You might want to make them a little bit bigger in proportion. Okay, so let's draw that together. And again, I need to make sure I want to fit my bird in here. So I'm going to cut my piece of paper at the size that I need it to be. So I'm going to cut a bit more. Now, these are just two styles of birds. You can draw your own, obviously, but this is so that you know how to draw these two. So I'm going to draw this bird for my box. All right. So I'm going to start up at the top of the page, leaving enough space for the beak. And it curves down towards the belly, down and around and up towards the tail. So that's going to be my neck, and this is the tail. So it's basically a U shape at the moment. Then you curve over a little bit because the bird's back, it's not quite flat. Curve back over towards the neck, and then up. And again, you can decide, depending on the style of bird, you can decide if your neck wants to be, you know, much taller. Maybe you're creating an ostrich or, you know, something like that. It's going to be shorter. And then I do the beak next. And a little eye, and again, a little bit of white dot in for the eye. I think mine's going to be like maybe a kind of a parrot or chicken maybe. The color in the beak. Then I think I'll do some tail feathers. Remember, we're going to be cutting these out, so don't have too small a detail. Like you wouldn't do something too small because it'd be harder to cut out. And then the wing. Another wing shape here. And the legs. So I'm just going to make my legs nice and short here. Kind of run out of space for my legs on my page, but that's fine. Again, I'm going to be cutting them out, so I'm not doing too much detail. Just checking. Yep, it'll just fit in. Perfect. You can almost, if you run out of space for your legs, you can almost do your bird just like that. And you could create maybe a bit of grass and pretend it's sitting behind the grass. Like you could have some 3D grass as well that we could put in front. I'll show you here. Now, curve it down. So you could do that and have some grass sticking at the front as well if you wanted to, like that, going in. All right. Now, have a look at our birds. So before you cut anything out, you're going to color it in, okay? For this, you can use markers, coloring pencils, watercolor paints, whatever you want. I think I'm going to use some colors maybe for mine. And then you can also use, to get a collage effect, you can use like a piece of paper as well. So I'm going to get a couple little bits of paper to show you that too. I have these random pieces of coloring pages. And I'm going to use, I think I'm going to use one of them for my bird's wing. I'm just going to trace out the shape of the wing. So like I say, there's a lot of different ways you could do. For collage or painting, drawing. If you're doing collage, you can just sort of stick it down. I'm just making it a bit smaller. I'm going to stick that down for my bird on the wing. But first of all, I'm going to color it in. So I'm just going for color really on mine. I'm not going to think too much about what actual colors of the bird might be, but I'm going to have a slightly darker color on one side, maybe a bit lighter coming up towards the top, blend it in a bit more. So I'm going to do the same on the wings. And you can have other animals in your box as well. Like you might want to have butterflies. Maybe little animals on the ground. Little rabbit popping its head up or something. Oh, I nearly forgot the tail. Just going to mix in a few different colors. Now, okay, so that's one. And for this one, I have this collage here. So I think I might use, and you could just use colorful pages. I just have these, so I've decided just to use them. They were just a random coloring book I had. don't like to waste anything, so I think I'm going to do this as the top. Now, if you're cutting this out, you can also use tracing paper as well to trace over it, or like baking paper from the kitchen. Okay, so I'm going to do my patterns on the back. I'm sort of sticking to the same color theme for this one, but I think I'll add a bit more vibrancy to it. I have this rainbow pencil. I think I'll put that one in. Imagine it's like a tropical bird. All the different colors on it. Colors you choose, it might depend on where in the world you've decided that your bird exists, you know. Now, just going to do a bit darker on the belly here. Generally, the belly of the bird is a bit darker. And the legs, I think I'm going to just keep them plain. Yeah. Find my little bit of grass that I created. So because we're creating 3D effects, you can cut out a few different things that you're going to make stand. So I'm going to do some grass here. In the green. Use marker for this one maybe. Mix a few in. What I sometimes like to do with marker is add a bit of water afterwards and spread it out. You ever do that? Add water to the paper afterwards. Like spread out the color. That's going to be a bit wet for a minute, so I'll just leave it for a second. I'm going to stick down this leaf here. Or not leaf, wing even. Birds do not have leaves. Let's stick that there. And the cool thing about creating like a collage bird as well is you can use like lots of different scraps of paper that you might have. You know, I always have like a box of different scraps and save them for this kind of project. But again, you guys are the artists, so you can decide, you know, what you're gonna, how you want to create it. Here's my box. Yeah, it's much. Okay. So I'm just going to pre-cut one of these out so that I can demonstrate the next stage. I'm just going to cut one of the bird with the wings out. And when you're cutting it out, you just want to get rid of all the background because we already have our background that we've painted in our box. Okay. So if you just watch here for a second, okay, when you have your 3D pieces, okay, the first step is you cut it out. Now, the reason why you don't stick it down like this is it'll be too wet to cut out because you'll have too much glue around it, okay? So cut it out first, and then we're going to stick it down to our cardboard. And this is just a piece of cardboard. It was like a cereal box cardboard. And you don't want it to be too thick, okay? So anything that's harder, you know, it could be the back of a notepad, anything like that. You put glue on, oops, too gluey. Put glue on it and stick it down. Use Make sure it's really well stuck, okay? And then we're going to cut that out. So you like accidentally cut off a leg or something, it wouldn't matter because you could just glue it all down to your cardboard and it'll hold it all together, because the legs can be a bit tricky. And then we cut it out a second time. So I know it seems like, oh, there's two processes to it, but you don't want it to be too gluey that you can't cut it out. So I always just cut around and then make it smaller and then start cutting out the details. And if like you do end up cutting something off or something like that, you can always just stick it down to another piece or put a little bit of card on the back to help, you know, secure it. It won't be the end of the world, you know. Have a look at our box. Okay. All right. So I want everyone to get one of their animals and another little bit of, excuse me, of card. Okay. Think about where they're going to go as well. Like I've got a river there, so it probably makes sense for my bird to be over here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have, because I've got grasses in the background, I'm going to have like some grasses in front of them as well, maybe like that, just to make it look 3D. Okay, so what we're doing is, if you imagine, we need to create a little support for them. We do this with paper, but we're going to make it extra strong. We're going to do it with a little bit of the cardboard. So what you're going to do is you're going to cut out sort of a long strip like this. Okay, so it's about the width of my thumb maybe. Okay, so it's just a long strip. Okay. You can make it shorter if you need to, but just start with a long strip. Mine is about like 9 centimeters long, shorter than the box if it's like that. Okay. And then what you're going to do is you're going to bend it twice. Okay. Bend it like a little bridge. So bend it over and over. So see, like a little bridge like that, or like a table. Because what you do is you stick one part to the back of the animal, okay? And then you stick the other part to the back of the box, all right? So one part to the back of the animal and one to the back of the box. Now, if you've bent it, right, and then this part's maybe a bit long, maybe it's coming out too far, you just need to make this part a bit shorter. So I'm just going to have a look there. And that's okay, because I'm going to put my grass just there. Okay, so got it like that. Where's my glue gone? I'm going to use my PVA glue for this. So the first step with it is sticking it to the back of your animal first. Okay, so put glue on there and then stick it down and stick it about in the center, okay, of whatever animal you've done. So hold it down like this, hold it down. So if this is the bottom of the animal, see the bridge goes like that, okay? The bottom of the animal is here, like this is the ground. So stick that first part down. Then I'm gonna put another bit of glue here. I'm gonna stick my bird in there, and then you need to squish it down on the back. So it can be a little bit fiddly. You're just trying to get that squished down. See if it holds. Okay, so that's my bird sitting in my box. Okay, so I'm going to do it again for my little flying bird. Now, if it'll be sitting like this, okay, and if it wants to pull up like this, you can get another. Oops. I'll show you on the smaller one how, if it wants to fall down, what you can do. Okay, so here, this is smaller. So when I have my little bit, I'm going to have to make this smaller because it's going to be too big. I don't want to see it. Okay, so I'm just making it a bit thinner so you don't see it behind the bird. And this time, okay, because this is flying, I don't want it to fall down. This time I'm going to make it into a little rectangle. Okay, so instead of it being one-sided bridge, I'm making it into, see, a rectangle shape like that. Okay, so I'm bending it all around because that's going to support it better. All right, so see there, doesn't matter what size it is, I'm just making it so that it's going to sit like that behind my bird. I'm going to glue that together first. Need to bend it around. So see, it's almost like a square ring, okay? You do exactly the same thing. You put one side glued to the back of whatever your animal is. Squish it down. Oops, mine wants to slide around. Sometimes you might need to leave it for a minute if it wants to slide. And then you put a little bit of glue here. Oh dear. And then decide where it's going to go in your box. I think mine's going to be diving down sort of towards the river. I might even create like a 3D fish. Let me just check. So my bird. And you can kind of, it'll still be enough that you'll be able, it'll still be wet enough that you can kind of move it around. Oops. You go in. Now, here on this one, I can see the white part here, and I want to hide that. So what I'm going to do, and you might want to wait till it's a little bit drier, but I'm going to go with my paints, and I'm going to paint in there. See on the back, because I don't want to see it. I'm going to camouflage it. Now, do wait till that's dry before you do it. But you see there where it was white before, I've camouflaged it now, so it's not as noticeable on the background. All right. I'm going to put my grass in as well. So I think I'll put my grass about there. So let's see for this one. Sitting right on the ground. So I think you can design your little brackets whichever way you think works best for them. Put some glue there. Just want to make sure that it's supporting your artwork. And this down. And right, there we go. So a few other things that you'll have to do is obviously decorate the outside of the box, okay? So that's totally up to you how you want to do it. You might want to leave it plain. You might just want to cover it in paper or just do it as one solid color. If you're coloring it, you just put your hand inside while you color, okay? On this one, I used some origami papers. And you might want to use plain papers. You know, you might want to, maybe you could, if you wanted, make it look like, you know, the world's continuing, like the sky is here.
And there you have your three-dimensional bird box with your collage birds and your little world that you've created. You can attach ribbon to the top of your box, as you can see here, and hang it from the wall. Thank you so much for joining us today for this creative craft tutorial with Vanessa from the Craft Corner. I hope you've enjoyed it. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, join the mailing list to stay in touch and do more creativity in the future. Bye for now.